Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to go through a list of some series that I started this year that I definitely plan to continue on with, or at the very least I would like to at some point continue on with. I did also do a companion video to this where I talk about some series that I'm on the fence about or I really don't want to keep going with, and there was some mini rants that came out that I wasn't intending to have happen, but they did. But anyway, if you're interested in seeing that video, I have it linked. Jumping into today's though, I'm going to start with Children of Ragnarok. This is by Cindy Williams-Chima. I have read her Seven Realms series, really like it. It's down there. And I really enjoyed that series quite a bit. I like the way in which she takes her time to build the world. She starts her characters in a place that is very flawed, but you kind of like them and you want to see them grow. And I think the growth of the characters is not just within single books, but they have arcs throughout the series. And so I was really excited to start Children of Ragnarok. I definitely feel like it went under the radar, and I have greatly enjoyed it. I can't wait for when the next one comes out to jump back into this world because I really liked it. If you're somebody who doesn't necessarily read a lot of YA fantasy, maybe you're more into adult fantasy because you prefer the amount of time that we tend to have, not always, I'm speaking generally, but the amount of time you have with adult fantasy, I do think Cindy Williams-Chima might be one to check out, and maybe Children of Ragnarok specifically, because I know a lot of people really like the Norse-inspired worlds, and I greatly enjoy this one, so I can't wait to revisit it when the sequel comes out. Next, we have Stolen Heir. This already is a continuation series after the Folk of the Air, and I just found it, I feel like this term sounds negative, but I mean it in a positive way. It's very compulsively readable. I think Holly Black has sort of polished the you just devour the book sort of writing style. And our main character, I found her to be not likable necessarily, but I was really gripped in following her. And I think that something that was done well in the Folk of the Air series was always questioning whether or not the Fae were tricking you or misleading you or being deceitful. And even when they're not, because of the precedent that's been set, you just always kind of assume. And you don't want to be naive and you don't want to be tricked, but it can lead you to then causing harm or being cruel to someone else. And so that's kind of what you're puzzling out throughout this book is the person our main character is interacting with, are they trying to take advantage? Are they being deceptive? And I like that sense of mystery. And I like that in my Fae stories where the Fae aren't necessarily just folklore inspired and they're not just like, look at how sexy and hot everybody is. When you get that kind of in between where you feel like there's a little bit more interaction with the Fae, it's sort of along these lines that I'm having a lot of fun with it, which I did have a lot of fun with this one, so I do plan to continue. From there we have Song of Silver, Flame Like Night. I won't have to wait too long to get back into this one, as I think that the sequel comes out in January, which is really exciting. And I really liked the world in this one. I thought that the sort of blend of magic and historical fiction all was done really seamlessly while having characters that I cared about. And also some moments that I was like, no. There were some kind of emotional moments in the story that I was taken aback by. I wasn't expecting to be that invested in some of what was happening within just the first book, but I found I was, and I'm really rooting for these characters, but I also really don't know what's going to happen. If you like the Shadow of the Fox series, while that one is Japanese inspired, I do think that some of the plot lines, there's some similarities in them from that series to this one, and sort of the moral ambiguity of what you're supposed to do when you're trying so hard to be free of oppressors, but you do not want to find yourself falling into basically like losing your honor, or you have to embrace darker magic in order to fight back, and what does that do to your own soul, that sort of thing. I think those moral conundrums are done really well in this story. From there we have Encyclopedia Fairies. Of course I'm going to continue this one. I loved this one so much. It was so delightful, whimsical, but also kind of dark, and I loved the blend of magic and historical fiction. It felt like I was actually reading from the journals of a real person back when Fae existed. That's what it feels like, right? And I really enjoyed that blend of academia and fantasy and historical fiction. I thought it was wonderful. I had such a good time with it. I have talked about this book a lot this year. It was just so much fun. After that, we have City of Nightmares. This one was so weird and so morbid, and it seemed like it didn't take itself seriously at all, and it was so creative and unique and different, and I really hope that it continues to expand on that because I had such a good time with the first one. Not for everybody, that's true of literally any book, but this one in particular is, I feel like, a little more niche. Godkiller. I can't wait for the sequel to this one. I don't need to elaborate. I loved Godkiller. I can't wait to be back in this world and be back with these characters and see what happens next. And I'm kind of weirdly scared at the same time because I loved the first one so much that I'm like, please, I want the next one to be just as good, if not better. So I'm really pumped about this one, but also really nervous. Bonesmith. I had such a good time with this book. I think a lot of you know that. It was so fun. It was a little cliche to start, but then once it got going, I felt like the characters had so much personality. It moved. The world was really cool. The action scenes were cool. The magic was interesting. And I just liked the further in we got, the more things expanded, the more the stakes grew. And I think it's just going to be a duology, so I'm excited to see the conclusion of this one. Next, we have The Adventures of Amina al-Serafi. The first one ends in a place where obviously, you're going to be like, what's going to happen next? But I do like that sense of the first one felt like it had its own adventure, and I just kind of want to see what happens in the next adventure. It's sort of the feel of those in general. I liked the characters. I thought there was a certain, I guess you could call it twist or reveal about the very end that was really sweet and really moving, and I really liked it, and I ended up having such a great time with this one, and it does adventure fantasy, I think, very well, so I am excited for that one. Next, we have Valdemar. So I started my Valdemar journey by reading the Arrows trilogy, and at the time I'm filming this, I haven't yet had a chance to pick up the next one, although I've wanted to since the beginning of the year when I picked up Arrows trilogy, and this is not the first in the series, of course, because there are series within this world, but I want to continue on with this world as I really liked it, and I can see where so much of fantasy now is inspired by Mercedes Lackey's works. In fact, not even just fantasy now, but fantasy that came in the 90s and even the 80s, like Robin Hobb and Robert Jordan, and there's these people that are kind of staples, and I'm like, I think there's a lot of inspiration taken from Mercedes Lackey, so I'm really excited to keep going with Valdemar. Not just for that, I also really enjoyed her writing, and I think she's actually very ahead of her time in a lot of ways. There's certain things that feel older, of course, because it is, a product of its time, but I also think there are certain things that in some ways are actually even ahead of where we are now in some areas. Anyway, moving on, Serpent and the Wings of Night. As far as fantasy romance goes, I have quite liked this first one, especially because I feel like it was a good blend of both the plot and character development and the relationship building. I thought all of that was balanced pretty well, and I liked the take on vampires in this. So I am curious to read the next one, and I'm also kind of curious to expand. I know there's novellas, I believe, in this, or short stories or something like that. And I think there are going to be other books that are like companion series to this one, and I'm curious to see what we get in those. After that, we have Murderbot. At the time I'm filming this, I have not completed the series, but my goal, if I can, is to finish it before the end of the year. I really liked Murderbot. I think it's the only sci-fi on this list, but I really enjoyed it, and I want to finish the series. What's out. I'm not sure if there's going to be another one after the newest one that just came out. Threads of Power. Had such a good time being back in this world. Had such a good time with my reread of the trilogy. I did kind of a read-along for this. Not kind of. I did do a read-along for this. So I have talked about it pretty extensively. I can't wait for the next one. As soon as I finished Threads of Power, especially because I had reread Shades and then I read Threads of Power, I'm like, oh, I just want to keep going though. And I can't because the next one's not out. Divine Rivals. The sequel will come out before the end of this year, and I really hope it doesn't break my heart because I loved that first book so much, and I really hope, if it's not even as good as the first one, it will still be a probably really good book because that first one just blew me away with how emotional it was, how powerful it was, how sweet it was, how tragic it was. It was great. So I can't wait to read the next one. Immortal Longings is the one that every time I bring it up, I'm like, I know I'm alone, but I thought it was cool. And I'm curious to see what happens next. If it doesn't deliver, then then I'm not like heartbroken because I didn't love the first one, but I thought it was cool. And it's more sci fantasy than just fantasy or science fiction. The setting's different from what I typically see in fantasy, and for that reason alone I had fun with it, but I also thought it was just kind of cool, so I'm excited to see if the next one delivers. And then last on the list, I haven't had a chance to talk about this at all this year, but I did read Green Rider and I had so much fun, and it was great to be in another slightly older fantasy story, and I know there's a lot of books in the series and the series still being written, so I'm very pumped that that's such a great feeling, right? That when you start a series and there's so many books in the series that you're just like, oh, now I have so much more to consume, yay. And the only downside is that it's not actually done, but there's I think at least 7 or 8 in the series so far, so I am excited to keep going. But anyway, that's it for some series that I definitely plan to continue after beginning this year. I would love to know your thoughts on all of these, and also based off what I said I liked about a lot of them, what are your recommendations? And then let me know what are some things that you definitely plan on continuing on with. Thanks so much for watching though. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.